You might have had your favourite movies of 1984, from Ghostbusters to Temple of Doom, Beverly Hills Cop, Nightmare on Elm Street and Gremlins to Karate Kid to Terminator. What a great year for films! What about music? You were told to relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Cyndi Lauper told us girls just want to have fun. Madonna was like a virgin. We were clapping our hands to Radio Gaga from Queen. Jumping to Van Halen, and George Michael had a careless whisper. Or maybe you fancied a bit of Agadoo from Black Lace. Wow, what a great year for music. But what of computer games? And more importantly, for us AMS fans, 1984 was the year that the AMSTRAD CPC 464 arrived, and with it, of course, came a huge bunch of AMSoft games. The launch was a big success, and publishers took note, and before the year was out, we found that over 80 games were commercially released for the AMSTRAD, which we delved into over 6 AM streams, with the viewers on the live stream scoring each of the games out of 10 in the live chat. And I've been recording these average scores into a spreadsheet and database. We now have the final results and can now show you the top 10 best AMSTRAD games of 1984 as voted by you, the AMSTRAD community who attended those streams, who got to see the games being played live and given a fair shake, rather than a poll being conducted on a forum, Facebook post or tweet where someone's having to recall a game from a long, distant, lost memory. And the results are interesting. Let's start off with the 10th place game. Our first game, and whilst at the bottom of our top 10, I'm still glad it made the list because it's hugely influential. Pyjamarama is arguably the first arcade adventure on the home computers that required you to pick up objects and use them to solve puzzles whilst jumping around in a standard platform affair, avoiding nasties, as I described in my long playing review video back in March 2022. Without this game, there might not have been a Magic Knight or a Dizzy series. And indeed, this spawned its own sequels in Everyone's a Wally, Herbert's Dummy Run, and 3 Weeks in Paradise. But actually, this was the second game in the series featuring Wally and his family, with Automania being the first. But in this game, you control Wally Week in his dream. He's snoozing and you have to wake him up before he oversleeps and is late going to work. Just imagine having to do this every night. Blimey. Whilst it's definitely showing its age in its graphics and gameplay, and it can be confusing and frustrating, it was highly original for its time. But it did it, and it got there first. Not only that, it has some mini-games of sorts in it too. And let's face it, even the Dizzy games by 1992 were still following the same basic formula that Pyjamarama first laid out. In 9th place, given this game scored so highly and also got in the top 10, both surprised and delighted me. Our first AMSoft game, the Galactic Plague. Possibly fueled by nostalgia? Quite likely, because it was part of the famous AMSoft 12-pack that was bundled with the AMSTRAD CPC 464 when you bought it new. And it was a very quick game to load up if you wanted to experience a simple Galaxian-style space fixed shooter that you'd seen in the arcades. It's perhaps not the best example of one, but there's a fair amount of love out there for it, and it's still good challenging fun in short bursts. I should point out now the average score seems quite low at 6.79 out of 10, but that's fairly decent for what we've seen score-wise over now lots of streams. Even the very best games, as we're seeing now into the 1985 streams we're doing, rarely get above 8 out of 10 because it just takes a few dissenting voters to bring the average score crashing down. Anyway, back to the Galactic Plague. Nice, colourful, smooth moving sprites, fast blasting action, and great pew-pew shooting and explosion noises is all very appealing if you like this kind of stuff. I like how it speeds up as there's less enemies on the screen. Is that an intended feature or an unexpected bonus because the code wasn't optimised and the AMSTRAD was chugging before with too many sprites on the screen? Either way, it works to its advantage, increasing the tension and difficulty with less enemies on the screen. Each level, the baddies move in the same set pattern, but they swarm the screen and overwhelm you, so you've got to learn it, and quickly. And I guess it draws you back in because each time you progress just that little bit further each time. I know it's not the greatest game in the world, but I have to be honest, I do still fire this up for a little blast even today from time to time. So there is something about it. Even if there are going to be some people out there that will find this all a little bit naff and frustrating and wonder what the fuss is about, which is fair enough. Otherwise, it's a nice fun little shooter. At number 8, perhaps not the most exciting or sexiest of games to begin this list with. Sorry for anyone who's not a footy fan, but Football Manager from Addictive Games was an important release and fondly loved by millions. Yes, millions. It's reported that this game and its even better sequel sold close to 2 million copies across all formats. Even despite the original game we're looking at today being so old and creaky and being coded entirely in BASIC, it was so addictive for football fans that coder Kevin Toms, and who can ever forget him memorably putting his smiling bearded face on the front cover of the box art, literally named his company Addictive Games, and continue to keep manufacturing and selling copies of this game, at least right up until 1987, a year before the sequel came out. Sure, it was very basic and simple, but I think it was the match highlights that was a real highlight to watch. And there's something both simultaneously relaxing and thrilling about watching them, seeing the results of your decisions and actions play out. A bit of power fantasy, perhaps, taking control of something that normally wouldn't be in your hands, especially if your footy team is normally rubbish and you've been forever frustrated in their performance. There's immense satisfaction in taking them from the bottom of Division 4 right to the top of the equivalent of the Premier League today and hammering Man United 4-0 in the FA Cup. And if you fancy an updated version of this, Kevin Toms is still kicking around making new versions of Football Manager for mobile devices today. But yeah, Football Manager is an all-time classic, and it's great on the AMSTRAD too. On to number 7. Now, here's proof that great games and hidden gems from AmSoft do exist. In fact, I did a whole video on this game last year on the channel. Quack-a-Jack is a deviously fun clone of a very little known of arcade coin-op called Checkman, released in 1982 by British company Zilak Zenitone. Despite coder Paul Shirley claiming it's based on some fantasy role-playing game called Fandonia on the title screen, which there is no trace of on the internet, and believe me, I've searched for it. Obviously trying to hide any trace of it being a rip-off of an existing arcade coin-op, I suspect. And yes, that's Paul Spin Dizzy Shirley, who also made some other fabulous games later on, including Mission Genocide, that silky smooth scrolling shoot 'em up. Anyway, you play as Red Jack, Pirate King, the most stylish character in Fandonia, and you're off to the palace dungeons to plunder loot. But why are you playing as a duck in the game? Beats me, I don't know. The box art has you as a weird looking dude in a red outfit. Anyway, but you've got to move about the dungeon and get to the eggs before they hatch a terrifying pterodactyl. However, as you move to a new tile, the old one disappears behind you, leaving a perilous drop that you can fall to your doom. You can wrap around the sides of the screen to avoid the various amusingly named and designed nasties. Kevin the Prawn on a drinking spree always sticks in the memory. You can also trap the nasties by disappearing the tiles around them too. One other trick up Jack's sleeve is he can shift the tiles horizontally left and right, as long as an object like a cooking pot is not at the edge of the screen blocking that. Meaning there's some higher thinking and skill involved in the game to find the optimum route in each dungeon when the next egg appears. This has always been great fun to play, even today. I never get tired of coming back to this one, and I love it to bits. And the lovely colourful graphics, beefy sound effects, cheeky fun presentation, good responsive controls and just great all-round gameplay mean this one is an absolute winner. Honestly, I think this should have been higher in the list personally, so check out Quack-a-Jack at number 7. In at number 6, a classic and beloved AmSoft game, probably the simplest game here, Oh Mummy! And featuring So High, and is obviously probably fueled by nostalgia more than anything. And like the Galactic Plague earlier, this also was featured in the AmSoft 12 pack, so many Amstrad owners have fond memories of this. And that Egyptian music is just embedded in your brain. All 10-second loop of it. Like I said, it's a very simple game, probably inspired by the arcade coin-op Amidar. Whilst you're supposedly inside an ancient Egyptian pyramid's tomb, it takes place on a single screen with you running around a grid of 20 boxes. You leave a trail behind you of footsteps, and when that trail covers all sides of a box, that box is cleared and it reveals its contents. It's either treasure, the key to the exit, a power-up or another mummy. Because of course, oh mummy! You're being chased by him. One thing I never really knew was that it was released on other systems before the Amstrad. I always assumed for years that it was an Amstrad or AmSoft exclusive, but AmSoft often got other companies to convert their games to the CPC. And I was surprised to find this not only was on the ZX Spectrum, but also on the MSX, Tatum Einstein, and Computer's Lynx of all things. Anyway, fun little game this one. Even on the hardest and fastest settings, it won't take you long to clear a pyramid. And then it's just exactly the same on the next one. So there's not much longevity here, and mostly it's here this high for those who owned it back in the day. However, those new to the game can still have a fun quick blast on it. Most enjoyable indeed. At number 5, ooh, now here's my personal favourite. I'd have had this at number 1 if I had my way. And we're still on AmSoft games here too. It's my beloved Roland on the Ropes. Now Roland, the intrepid explorer, has found himself stuck at the bottom of a deadly tomb and has to climb his way out to the top. It's a bit of a maze of the odd dead end, avoiding ghosts, rats, chameleons, mummies, bats and skeletons through increasing levels of difficulty. Roland, looking a bit Indiana Jones-esque, has to obviously climb ropes, only armed with a gun that can at least scare the ghosts away, but can destroy the mummies and skeletons, or the bats with a well-timed jump shot. Green potion bottles restore health, there's more bullets to pick up, and there are treasures to find for extra score. It has a lovely bright colourful graphics, and for me it has the definitive and best Roland sprite. Because poor Roland, for a mascot of Amstrad and AmSoft of sorts, changed its sprite design for every game and never had a consistent look, unlike say Horace, his rival on the ZX Spectrum, but then Horace looked crap. The game also has a hardware scroll going on, but they didn't really master it because, as you can see, it has graphical glitches going on, which is pretty distracting. But eventually you get used to it. In later years, coders learned to tame this, but well, this is, ladies and gentlemen, officially the very first ever AMSTRAD game. Yep, as confirmed by Roland Perry himself, the man who oversaw and built the CPC 464 and who the Roland character is named after. Yep, this, along with Roland in the Caves, was the first game turned into the AMSTRAD offices by any coder or publisher and loaded up, then made ready. By Indescomp from Spain actually, a conversion of their earlier ZX Spectrum game called Fred. Anyway, what I especially love about this game, and why I still adore coming back to play this even to this day, is that I'm pretty 90% sure that the levels are randomly generated every time, meaning you get a new experience each time you play, and they work. I've never come across a glitch or an impossible level that you can never escape from, and that's superb programming. I never tire or get bored of playing this. And for the first ever AMSTRAD game, what a way to start. Really, this should be number 1 in the list, but it's at number 5, but at least it made the top 10. Anyway, this is Roland on the Ropes, and it's brilliant. At number 4, it's Nightlaw. Finally, we're away from AmSoft games and onto the first AMSTRAD release from Ultimate Play the Game with Nightlaw. And what a way to begin. This isometric adventure is brilliant, adding additional colour compared to the ZX Spectrum version of which this is ported from. You play as Saberman by the looks of it, returning from Saberwolf, the previous game, who has been turned into a werewolf, and you have 40 days and nights to find a cure to release yourself from this curse. First, you need to find the wizard Melchior and his cauldron, and then you'll be told an item to fetch and bring back to concoct a potion. I think it's 8 different items in total, and they're scattered around over 100 screens, full of bizarre enemies and lots of devious traps and puzzle rooms, some of which you'll have to solve by pushing items around or picking up and dropping items to allow you to reach higher places, something we've all seen in much later similar type games like Head Over Heels or Get Dexter, but Nightlaw did it all first, and so well. As far as I know, this was the first isometric 3D style adventure of its type. Quite revolutionary, and the formula has hardly been changed. Added to that, here we have this brilliant day to night cycle where the player changes from human to werewolf. And in werewolf form, you're in increased danger from attack from specific enemies. For example, don't enter the cauldron room as a wolf because you'll get attacked by the cauldron itself. You'll also have to learn the skill of dropping an item to stand on, then jumping and picking up the item at the same time, which is difficult to master if you want to stand any chance. Anyway, despite the usual frustrations with this type of game, it's truly groundbreaking and original, and thoroughly deserves to be this high up on the list in the top 10. So there you go, Nightlaw. Truly original and groundbreaking, and it got there first. We're now in the top 3, and we're back to AmSoft games, and maybe our last true AmSoft one, but arguably the most beloved one of all, the classic Harrier Attack. Take to the skies in your Harrier jump jet off the aircraft carrier, bomb that boat at the start, then attack the island avoiding all the flak fire, blast the enemy fighters out the sky with your rockets, and bomb the enemy base before returning to your carrier, just to do it all over again at a higher level. Hopefully your fuel won't run out before then, so keep your speed up, usually to max or above the 3/4 mark. Fuel really acts as a timer in the game. But if I'm honest, of all the Amsoft games we played on the list, it's the one that technically looks and moves and sounds the worst. It scrolls roughly in kind of steps. It's very basic, small and simple graphics, and even your Harrier sprite flickers. There's no music, but I'd say the sound effects are kind of decent for the time, but it's the gameplay that draws you in and keeps you coming back for more. It's simply so much fun, especially the dogfights with the enemy planes. Whilst it's a bit implausible that you can control your rocket simultaneously as you move your plane up and down, but it's a gameplay design choice that just simply works. It's hard initially to master hitting those fighters, but fire at the right distance and move up at the last second is usually the trick. But at higher difficulty levels, they switch up a bit, those enemy planes, and that doesn't work as well, so you need to adjust your tactics. And then at the end of the level, you can unleash your bombing hell on the enemy bases. Boom. And I'm glad that the manual says that you are bombing an island base there, because for years I thought you were bombing a city, because some of those buildings kind of look like tower blocks or skyscrapers to me. And I always felt a little uneasy and squeamish, like I was part of a blitz killing innocent civilians or something. I mean, I suppose we're still killing soldiers who were people here, and this was released not long after the Falklands War, where Harriers were used a lot, so this is probably cashing in on that a bit. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that kind of stuff. So, anyway, don't be put off initially by its crude looks and lack of presentation. Don't judge a book by its cover. Just take to the skies and get stuck in. Whatever you do though, don't bomb your own carrier at the start, because rather hilariously, it won't be there waiting for you after the enemy island, and you'll be greeted by an endless ocean where you'll eventually run out of fuel and crash. Oh, and if you find yourself about to crash and burn, hit that escape key if you're quick enough, and you'll parachute out to safety and get a bonus score. But yeah, an absolute all-time early classic. Chocks away and ace it high for Harrier Attack. In our number 2 spot, and honestly I thought it might have been our winner before we even started these streams, is the beloved Fruity Frank, a fast-paced clone of the arcade coin-op Mr. Do. That's far better than it deserved to be for a game from 1984. Whilst I don't think it's trying to be an arcade perfect conversion, there's a few minor features missing. To be honest, I find it a lot more fun than the arcade coin-op original of Mr. Do, and you also have options on the title screen to tweak the game's speed between fast, medium or slow. I say play it on fast for some crazy fun. I mean, all you have to do is collect fruit on the levels, apart from the apples, which you can use to squash the nasties that roam around trying to get you. And you've got a bouncy ball to throw for protection, but be careful, once thrown, it takes a while to reassemble and come back to you, leaving you vulnerable. Anyway, it's got lovely, vibrant, colourful graphics, great sound effects, and fun jingles of memorable, well-known music to keep you entertained, and it's all wrapped up in some great presentation for its time. It set a big standard for clones of arcade games, or indeed official conversions on the AMSTRAD, that, to be honest, those that followed hardly came anywhere near reaching, even from the big name publishers, of the heights of Fruity Frank for many years after. It's also an incredibly rare game to find now, despite its status within the AMSTRAD community. It could almost warrant the status of a hidden gem, given its rarity to find on eBay and how little it's known by the wider retro community. Well, I hope a lot more of you now check it out, at least by emulation, because Fruity Frank is an all-time AMSTRAD classic, and it very nearly missed out on the top spot here. So, our number one game of 1984 for the AMSTRAD CPC 464 as voted by you? Well, it ended up being the classic Manic Miner of all things. And why not, I suppose? It's one of the greatest platformer games of all time, starting and cementing the trend for them on the home computers back with the ZX Spectrum original in 1983 from legendary coder Matthew Smith. This was done for Bug Byte, then later brought to Software Projects, a company he co-founded and re-released the game at. The AMSTRAD version was then released by Software Projects in 1984, which is quite rare to find, but many of you will likely have owned the AmSoft re-released in 1985, or the later budget Mastertronic re-release. Anyway, it's a game inspired by the Atari game Miner 2049er. It went on to sell millions of copies across multiple home computer formats as it was converted to basically everything going at the time, and of course spawned a famous sequel in Jet Set Willy. But back to this AMSTRAD version. It's also pretty much a perfect conversion of the Speccy original, just with a few less colours being in mode 1 and restricted to 4 colours. And from what I remember, most notably the final cavern is different on the last level. Otherwise, if you put them side by side, they play at exactly the same speed and frame rate. And arguably, the AMSTRAD version is the most faithful to the Speccy original out of all the many versions. For example, the BBC Micro one is slower and flickery, the Commodore 64 one has iffy collision detection ruining it, and so forth. So yeah, it's a great version of an all-time classic, and I can see why you all voted it into the number one spot for the best AMSTRAD game of 1984. So there you go. I hope you all enjoyed watching. We're currently working our way through all the games of 1985 on the AmStream, so do join in there when you can on Friday nights at 9 PM on this very channel. So don't forget to subscribe and leave a nice comment and let me know what you think and what your favourite games of 1984 on the AMSTRAD were. Thanks again, and see you all again soon. Goodbye. Bye.
So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please click a like below, leave a comment, and also subscribe if you haven't already. And over that way, there's another video for you to check out. Zypho, out.